I know how weird the title of this video sounds. Even if you've never played this game before, hell, even if you've never heard of it before, you may have come into contact with one of its characters in the past without you knowing. This game gave me the most meta experience of my life, and it unironically changed the way I think. To be truthful, I have no idea how to talk about the non-existence of you and me. I haven't really played that many visual novels, but this one might be one of my favorites. So much so that I am quite astounded to see that it's not being discussed nearly as much as it should. It's a short but sweet experience, it gets pretty philosophical and it likes to fuck with your mind. If any of that interests you, go ahead and get it, it's like $2 on Steam. And I know that a good deal of the people watching won't play it no matter how much I insist, and I mean, I get it, I'm one of those people too. But I do sincerely think that the game is meant to be a very personal and introspective experience. And I feel like talking about the contents of the game and filtering them through my interpretation will inevitably tarnish the experience. That said, I can't really make a video on it without doing that, even if it is to the experience's detriment. So one last time, I'll go play with you to go play it, and if you still don't want to check it out, it's okay, it's alright, I'm going to go over the chapters anyway. So I came across this game while I was browsing through the dating sim category on Steam in a feeble attempt to remedy my crushing loneliness, and eventually I found a title with quite the eye-catching art style and a main girl who is totally not my type. What do you mean? The non-existence of you and me, or actually the non-existenceN of you and me if you're reading the title correctly, which is definitely one of the artistic choices of all time. As of the writing of this part of the script, I finished the game twice, and like I said in the beginning, I have no idea how to begin presenting it to you. This visual novel's core theme cannot be summarized in one sentence. It's a story about the nature of existence, feelings, perception, about the desire to escape the cold harshness of reality. It provoked in me an emotional reaction unlike anything I have ever experienced in media. And while this could be chalked up to good writing, I think it has more to do with the fact that this game not only managed to get very deep into my mind, but it also explored as its central subject a concept that is very intimate to me. Out of the bat, I want to bring your attention to the fact that there is no load or save system, which make the writing of this video quite a bit harder than it already was to begin with. That's why I want to give a shout out to Mamatade, whose complete playthrough helped me immensely with writing the script. There's a link to their video in the description, please go give them a like. The only way we can start the game is with this continue button, which will be there even if this is your first time opening the game. And it all starts with a very puzzling opening sequence. There is nothing. Just a disembodied voice talking to you. She says that she's grateful that you're going through with this, but questions if she's still herself right now. The sentence is specifically written like this, and it's hard to make out what exactly she means at this point in time, but further on this will make more sense. The voice goes on to say that although in the past she longed for the day when she would see you go through with this, she never truly wished for it to come true. But regardless, she accepts your choice, even if it means denying the story, the choice you had made previously. Quote, "Let the me of this moment fade away forever." And just like that, we are shown the first chapter of the game. You were lying in bed during one morning. You had been lying there for so long that you don't even remember when you last ate. The only thing that was left for you to do was to wait for your death. That's when she shows up in your window. A beautiful yet mysterious girl that does nothing but sit there and stare at you with an enigmatic smile. You try to speak to her, only to realize that it had been so long since you last spoke that you barely remembered how to do it. With some difficulty, you manage to muster forth a sentence. Who am I? Did I just manage to speak? Or is it that the choices in this game are meaningless?
ちゃんと聞こえてたわ。あなたはこのゲームの主人公よ。今は部屋の中で美少女の攻略を企んでいるところね。
And what about you? Are you the beautiful maiden I've encountered?
本当に知りたい？選択肢に選ばされたのではなくて？
In the next moment, she vanished from your sight. Then she emerged again, this time closer than before.
見つめられるとドキドキする？
It's wonderful. I could stay like this, with your gaze upon me, forever.
じゃあ死ぬまでずっと見つめ合いましょう。
The game will actually let you stay like this indefinitely if you want.
じゃあ私が本当に実在していると思う？
I'm not sure. I want to figure out the answer to that question with you. Did I just get a hug?
うん、この行為は間違いなくハグと呼べるわね。これは儀式でもあるの。君に私の存在を感じてもらうための儀式ね。ねえ、今の感覚を教えて。
The softness of a cat's fur brushing against your palm.
なるほど、触覚ってことね。つまり大した刺激ではなかったってことね。もう少し力を入れたわ。こうすると二人の距離がもっと近くなったわね。それできつくハグされた今はどんな感覚？
The first sprout breaking through the soil.
よかったわね、感覚が強くなって。さらに力を入れたわよ。まるで合体しているみたいね。で、合体するほどハグされるのはどんな感覚なのかしら。
The world is my representation. Such an observation, though impartial, is not without truth. The enlightenment is mankind's emergence from its self-imposed immaturity. Cosimo lived in the trees. The branches stretch outward. What exists, exists. What does not exist, does not exist. Man is the measure of all things. Alice ran across the field like a man, and fortunately was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole. I hate you.
素晴らしいわ。儀式は成功よ。とにかく私はリリスよ。よろしくね。
What the fuck? The first chapter is a bit of a weird one, as it opens with a chair jump scare. One of the many oddities about this game is that part of its narration is done by the furniture in your bedroom. Later on, I'll give my interpretation for this, as well as why they treat you like royalty. For now, the main thing I want you to focus on is on the fact that the chair says the following. Your Majesty, it's been a long time since went missing. Shall we continue the search? You can ask who it is, but none of your furniture really knows anything about them. All except for the conspicuous black notebook. It gives you a lot of information on, except all of it is redacted. The only real piece of information you can get out of it is that is a woman. But there's also a part that I'd like you to remember for later. Quote, she was once, and then you chose, which is why you now, leading to her. I don't know what words go where in this sentence coherently, but I do know what it's talking about, and by the end of the story you will too. Actually, it kind of makes sense that the notebook would be the only one to remember who is. Quote, the girl beyond the world has disappeared. You get a sense of familiarity upon hearing that description, and you feel compelled to open the notebook to investigate more. But if you try that, you get interrupted by Lilith. And from then, you just pick up from where you left off, with all the bonding and memories and whatnot. It's hard to gauge her true intentions because even though she explicitly said it's a pleasure to meet you in an earlier section of the game, here she introduces herself again as your childhood friend. Naturally, you don't remember jack shit, so she tries to gaslight you into recalling all those fun childhood memories of climbing trees, catching butterflies and other stuff like that. You can call her out on her bullshit, and she'll try to add in a couple of details, but the bottom line is that she wants you to believe that you are her childhood friend, and that you've been reunited for the first time in a long time. But you know what might refresh your memory? Baking a cake, apparently, so that's what you do for the rest of the chapter. And it's interesting because the game gives you the option to follow Lilith's instructions in two ways. You can either do it normally, or you can add in a little razzle-dazzle. For example, the first thing you're supposed to do is to separate the egg whites from the yolks. You can do that normally, or you can do that with extreme sorrow. These types of shenanigans happen all throughout the game, same for the little words that sometimes show up at the top of a sentence. Interpret them however you like, I'm not sure how to take them myself. Anyways, once you're done with all the ingredients, but before you put them in the oven, you get the opportunity to ask Lilith a question about who she really is and what's going on. But regardless of what you ask, she just ends up fucking with you a little bit and then teleports you to the couch dimension for a bit of philosophical pondering. There she tells us that in understanding the existence of another, the concepts that come to mind are stuff like friends, family, acquaintances, stranger, enemies, etc. All those things have one common denominator, that being the self as the observer's perspective. After all, someone is a friend to someone else, a parent, a sibling, a rival, a stranger to someone else. Through that lens, all those concepts are fundamentally relational, and the way they're labeled is intrinsically tied to how they interact with the self. She then poses a question. What kind of existence is Lilith's identity? What does that identity imply, and what stories can unfold from it? All of this is in service of trying to answer the question of whether or not she truly exists, the question posed to us in the beginning of the game. This is just one of the many ways in which we're trying to explore that question. For all intents and purposes, from the perspective of the main character, she exists as an individual, a girl standing right in front of them in their bedroom. To quote Lilith herself, "Anyone with common sense would think that the world is functioning as it should, just like this game is running as it should." And that is the key, common sense. The filter through which we're able to unpack all the information our senses are capturing and process it into usable data. In other words, it's how we make sense of the world. It's so reliable that it often makes people forget the self as a perspective. There's no need for all that subjective judgment and whatnot when you have common sense. But that's when Lilith throws a wrench into things when she says that common sense isn't necessarily right for all situations. For example, this is a visual novel, and it's assumed that the things are behaving as they should in any other visual novel. Stuff like the character who is currently speaking is the one who has their name displayed on top of the sentence. But what if that is not the case, and some other object is speaking the sentence instead of her? Same goes for the assumption that the scene is taking place in a room, when perhaps it could be a movie set or a stage or something like that. Not to mention what the state of the world outside could possibly look like. It could be normal, it could be the apocalypse, it could be something else entirely, who knows? This is what happens when common sense falters. Your conception of the world can no longer be trusted to make sense, and thus the exploration of the self begins, and its experiences will shape how one will face the world. To use an example that I've witnessed in my own life, I am currently majoring in data science, but before that I was in college for engineering, and I couldn't help but become very aware of all these small details that you wouldn't notice unless you had to deal with a lot of physics problems. Stuff like how torque is being applied to certain structures or the intricacy of the designs of everyday objects that I probably wouldn't have given a second thought had I chosen a different major. Similarly, if you decide to major in something like psychology, my guess is that you'll become more likely to take notice of specific behaviors of individuals and groups. Different perspectives will inevitably make it so that you interact with and perceive the world in different ways. Confused? Good. You're having the reaction expected of you. This game can rapid-fire philosophical discourse at a rate faster than I could process. And while in this video I'm doing my best to unpack it and present it in a more digestible way, I do have an inkling that this game is meant to be presented in a confusing way in some parts. Case in point, the nonsensical options that you see every now and then. Anyways, the protagonist has a bit of a crisis unzipping all this information, and their brainwaves accidentally begin to turn their oven into a time machine. Don't ask me how. There's a little minigame where you need to convince your oven to not become a time machine, and depending on the outcome, you'll be given one of two endings to chapter 1. If you successfully manage to convince your oven, then the cake comes out a bit shit, but you manage to decorate it, and there's a whole cute scene with Lilith being devastated by dropping the cake on the floor, and you try to console her. Now, her dropping the cake here is a plot point, and I want you to keep this at the back of your mind because it will be in the test later. She then takes you once again to the couch dimension, where, through the power of suggestion, you can make a new cake that tastes however you want. Yay! However, if you don't manage to convince your oven, you'll open it to discover a note written by you from 10 years ago saying that an organization by the name of Fontainebleau cannot be trusted with the time oven, as they'll try to turn the world into a nightmare dystopia where everyone has to play visual novels 25 hours a day. The game suddenly jumps to some point in the future, where you see a girl with a white lab coat amidst the ruins of a desolate world. It's Lilith, and she says that although this is as far as she can take you, she tells you that the Lilith from the next timeline will be there to protect you. You dash into one of the buildings, find the oven inside, write a note and send it to yourself from the past, and the game promptly jumps back to the present, where you are still baking the cake right before the minigame. You then progress through as normal and the chapter ends. Yeah. Chapter 2 is a bit of a funny one, as it opens with this sentence, and Sartre did not say that. You wake up to the sound of your alarm, and to Lilith's sweet voice urging you to get up. You glance at your clock to see that it's 2 in the fucking morning, but it's alright since you had been sleeping since 4 PM the previous day. Anyways, Lilith tries to hurry you, saying that you're going to be late. Late for what, you ask, and she tells you, you're going to be late for your RP session. No, not like that. You see, the girlie here organized an RPG for you called the Morphean Codex, the Forest of Silver Shallots. You close your eyes, and when you open them again, you find yourself in a majestic castle. Your objective is very simple: rescue the princess and defeat the Demon Lord, whose lair lies at the end of the eponymous forest. On your journey through the forest, you happen to bump into an NPC, an anime girl with a different accent color. She introduces herself as a scholar studying the local plant life, and as you'd expect from any conventional RPG, she gives you a side quest. One important distinction is that this character is not voiced like Lilith is, but she is an aspect of Lilith in a way. The side quest she gives you is to basically give her advice on how to finish her scholarly paper, which is actually just a novel she's writing, and it's a dating sim at that, about a mandrake plant. And, well, while she says that, the reality is that it's just a visual novel with a main character that is described to be very similar to Lilith. You help her write her story, and based on your choices, it will be either awfully generic, somewhat surprising, or just plain stupid, as this chapter has a bit of a fixation with hamburger patties for some reason. Anyways, the scholar will be thrilled with whatever you say, and as a reward, she will give you the titular Morphean Codex, which is just the notebook from chapter 1. Just like before, the book talks to you, only this time the scholar can hear it, which prompts her to realize that she can hear the in-game narration, and then proceeds to have a bit of a crisis upon realizing that she's just a minor NPC inside a game. But it's alright, she's chill with it, and she's going to explain us why. The scholar tells us that identity is a type of limitation, as when you define something, you negate all other possibilities. Identity necessarily means moving away from a perfect state, say that of a god, who can be everything at once. Omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence. Something that is everything, by definition, lacks identity, as there is no specific characteristic that can define it that can't also be attributed to something else. But ironically, this limitation can be freeing, as only through her lack of omniscience she was able to have this delightful conversation with you. And that's precisely why she isn't all that bummed out about being an NPC. Through her limitation, she can live her life to the fullest within the framework of her reality, just as the fictional character from her story can do the same with her reality, just as you, dear viewer, can do the same with our own nightmarish existence. Once you're done with the scholar, you finally manage to make your way into the Demon Lord's keep and come face to face with the final boss. Lilith, being the silly goose that she is, forgot to give this boss an actual weakness, but it's okay because the book we got from the scholar has the ability to do just that for us. I know this may sound like a Deus Ex Machina, but trust me, it isn't. The way I chose to defeat her was to give her a fear of criticism, which feels more cruel than actual violence for some reason. Congrats, you did it, you killed the final boss. Now you just have to rescue the princess, which is Lilith, incidentally, don't think about it too much. You take her back to the castle at the start, get crowned king, and the two of you live happily ever after. Wait, the fuck you mean bad end? On the morning of the next day, Lilith tells you that since you played the RPG she created, it is now time for you to pay up. You say that you didn't know there would be money involved in this whole ordeal, but she tells you that it doesn't really matter. All she wants you to do is to leave here. Leave and go outside. I know I made it sound dramatic, but it actually is. The door before you feels imposing. It had been there collecting dust for untold eons. Was the doorknob rusted? What would the outside even look like after all this time? You place your hand on the doorknob and muster all your strength of will to open it. You stand there for what feels like minutes, until you feel the warmth of Lilith's hand laid upon yours.
ずーっと君のそばにいるわ。
You finally manage to open the door. Oh, this isn't so bad.
大丈夫？
There is a strange presence in the park. Not only that, but you also feel like there's something very wrong with you. An uneasiness that seems to make the very air hard to breathe. Lilith quickly comes to your aid, urging you to sit at a bench so that you can rest. But much to the dismay of both you and her, there's someone already seated there. It's a tall figure dressed in a suit. Its face is completely blank, perhaps because you can't even muster up the courage to look at it. Lilith tries to greet it. It doesn't respond. She tries again, saying that you're not feeling well and that you need a place to rest. It still doesn't reply. But things change when you try to take action. You sit down and the stranger finally reacts. You don't feel any better. You can't even make sense of what it's saying. The awkwardness of the situation only serves to make you feel queasier. Lilith suggests that you try to make conversation with the stranger. Try to talk about something, anything, the park, the weather, whatever. You try to do so. It doesn't matter. The stranger spits forth more incomprehensible gargle. No matter what you try to say, the stranger only replies with more of its cacophony, and you can't help but feel a vague sense of hostility with every reply. In response, you try to make yourself sound friendlier. It doesn't make a difference. The act of speaking with that entity begins to feel Sisyphean. Merely trying to put together a coherent sentence is taking an unfathomable amount of processing power. You decide to say whatever comes to your mind. I'm in here in a suit. Are you someone who lost their job but still pretends to have one? Every time the weather is nice, I think about jumping from a tall building. As a weird stranger suddenly talking to you, have I really... Our coffee was made with... I love popular games. You must think I'm funny, right? My creativity is limitless. I can't take this anymore. I want to go back. Lilith snaps her fingers. Suddenly you're filled with a soothing calmness, even if just for a moment.
私はここにいるわ。大丈夫よ。大丈夫よ。
The screen fades to black. This moment is one that I thought about often when making this video, but first I'd like to ask you, how do you interpret what just happened? I have my own interpretation and I'll get to it once we're done with the story, but chapter 3 is not quite over yet.
デートしましょう。
Okay, Lilith wants to take us on a date. After all, this is a dating sim, and once you're done, you go back to your bedroom. The two of you decide to go to a theme park. The only problem is that once you arrive there, you read on a sign that it's been closed since July 20th, 1999. Though your first instinct upon seeing this is to give up, Lilith doesn't let that stop your date. You two step inside the park, and with the snap of her fingers, she makes the Ferris wheel operational again. You climb the fence, hop on one of the carts, and begin your ascent. There is a quiet moment once you reach the apex. Lilith's features are softly illuminated by the starlit sky. It feels serene, yet somewhat poignant at the same time. You turn to Lilith, that girl that has been nothing but accepting of you ever since she appeared on your window. There are some burdensome feelings you want to get off your chest, and she feels like the only person you can truly confide on. That's when the game presents you with 3 topics for you to speak with her, and depending on your choice, nothing happens, as she'll immediately change the subject to talk about her band, Hoi Clos. Hoi Clos, incidentally, is a French play by philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, and according to Google, its name roughly means a private conversation to be had behind closed doors. The play itself is about 3 people who, in the afterlife, are forced to spend an eternity together in a room. That in and of itself is pretty interesting, but that's not all. The last line of the play is, "Hell is other people." Yes, exactly, that one nihility blessing from Star Rail. This phrase pertains to one of Sartre's ideas. Essentially, that under the gaze of others, we become objects instead of subjects. I'll try to explain this idea the best I can at the risk of sounding like a moron, but here we go. In life, we can't help but be perceived in a certain way by the people around us. The image they have of us will roughly resemble who we are as a person, say 20 or 80% accurate, but it's never as accurate as the image you may know yourself to have. Ergo, there will be aspects about you that they will make up. Be it from inference or exaggeration or whatever, they might characterize you with aspects that don't fit your personal identity. While you're alive, you can still try to change their view, but once you die, their perception of you will forever be frozen in time. What remains of your identity post-mortem will slowly erode as you are remembered in ways that are not who you truly were. Until eventually, only a fraction of the real you is left. If there's anything left at all. Oh yeah, and by the way, Lilith is the singer of the band, with the other two members being the anime girls we met, their names being Foucault and Satre. How subtle. And then there's an honest-to-God musical number. And it's not really that good, in my opinion. The lyrics, though existential, are nothing revolutionary, and the time signature is utterly fucked, at least in the Japanese version. The Chinese version of the song is a bit better. Now, while I could sit here and unpack the lyrics, I won't, mainly because the ideas they transmit are basically more of the same we've already talked about. Existentialism and being condemned to be free. I don't know what that means. And honestly, I think the actual visual novel portions have more interesting themes to them. Now, for the sake of making Lilith happy, let's pretend we fucking loved her performance, okay? After the show, you get the opportunity to speak with all three band members, and this is when the game does something that is actually kinda clever. If you talk to Satre, she'll tell you that she wrote the lyrics herself because she's a genius and the leader of the band and all that, but she tells you that she fears for the integrity of the band because a certain friend of hers confided in her that Foucault's coolness is just an act. She actually spends hours practicing her poker face in the mirror, and she fakes being nonchalant and emotionless. Satre thinks that's cringe, so she made a pact with Lilith behind Foucault's back to keep the band together forever. However, if you then go to Foucault, she'll tell you that she wrote the lyrics herself because she's amazing and all that, but she tells you that a certain friend of hers confided in her that Satre quotes philosophers not because she's trying to teach her anything, but because she wants to make Foucault think that she's smart and intellectually superior. Foucault thinks that's cringe, so she made a pact with Lilith behind Satre's back to keep the band together forever. And finally, if you go to Lilith, she tells you that she wrote the lyrics herself because she's so hardworking and all that, but she tells you that despite her efforts, there is still a bit of turmoil within the band. I wonder what she's referring to. It's okay though, as that only motivates her to become a better leader. Did you catch what happened here? All three of them introduce themselves as the main composers and immediately try to enforce a certain perspective they want you to have about themselves. Lilith describes herself as hardworking, Satre as smart, and Foucault as cool. Ignore Lilith for now, she's no longer pertinent to this analysis, but when we look at the other two, we see that they are talking shit behind the other's back. More specifically, they're criticizing the way the other is trying to be seen. Satre tries to make herself appear smart, but to Foucault, she just comes out as pretentious and mean. Conversely, Foucault tries to make herself appear cool and aloof, but to Satre that just makes her look cringe. Hell is other people. They have constructed images of each other that are different from the way they want to be perceived, and all that is done through subtext. This game slaps ass. The other two members leave, and you get the opportunity to ask Lilith why she badmouths Satre to Foucault and vice versa. She asks you how you even know that it was her that they were referring to, and you tell her that besides those two, she's the only other person that exists in this world. And then she tells you that at no point she actually talks shit about any of them. She simply told them the truth, and from that truth, both Foucault and Satre came up with their own conclusions, once again showing the dissonance between the way we want to portray ourselves and the way other people will end up perceiving us. They both fabricate an image of themselves to put in front of the secrets they want to hide, and Lilith tells you that this constant struggle and pressure to hide the parts of ourselves we don't want others to judge is an agonizing aspect of human existence that we all must bear with in our own way. But this all relates to a grander topic that permeates all human relationships, that of subjectivity. In our connections with others, both fabrications and the truths pertain to the acknowledgement we want to receive from others. The validation of our friends and loved ones, or the way we talk shit about someone we don't like. But Lilith explains that to validate your own subjectivity, it comes at the cost of undermining someone else's, in the same way that someone's superiority by definition implies someone else's inferiority as a prerequisite. The perception you hold of someone inevitably conflicts with the perception they hold of themselves in some aspect. And Lilith then poses you a question that hints at the reality of what's really going on in the game. She tells you that the world out there is full of prejudice and malice, a constant war of subjectivities clashing against one another. She asks you, are you prepared to step into such a world? Regardless of your answer, she plainly tells you that she has no subjectivity, or rather that her subjectivity is willing to dissipate for your own sake, as she is always presenting herself wholly to you. You embrace each other under the starry sky, a feeling both comfortable and poignant. You wish you could capture this moment and never let go. You wish you could stay there with her forever. But you must go. Something calls out for you, under your seat. You find a black notebook from your room. It asks you why you're wasting time here when you said you wanted to know the truth about the girl from beyond this world. It asks you, where are you now? How did you get here? Lilith grabs your hand. She looks at you with that gentle, enigmatic smile and asks what's on your mind. The notebook speaks again. I see now, you're with her. That explains everything. Lilith is the girl from The Ferris wheel stops abruptly, leaving you both stuck. Lilith looks out a window and sees that you are close enough to the ground that you can try to jump. A feeling of intense vertigo floods your mind. Sure, you are close, but is it close enough? What if you die? You jump, you land, and Lilith holds you, asking if you're okay. You look pale. You feel cold.
平気よ。後のことは私に任せて。
This chapter is probably the most surreal one so far. Yeah, like the rest of the game was fucking normal. You feel disorientated. It's hard to get a grasp on your surroundings at first, but soon enough, images begin to flash on your mind. The amusement park, Lilith. A question. What is Lilith really?
大丈夫。
You are not, and it's because Lilith is right in front of you. Oh my god. Lilith claims that you are sick. She then produces a jar full of candy that she claims is medicine that will make you feel better. It's odd, you don't feel anything in particular, so this whole thing just feels like another one of Lilith's gimmicks, until you realize that you can hear her hair ribbon talking to you. You tell her this and she gives you the yellow pill. She asks you what other symptoms you have, and the options the game gives you are kind of funny. She gives you both the pink and the green pill. You can't help the feeling that they taste kinda good, almost like they're candy. You ask Lilith for more, but she refuses, saying that there's a rule that a patient cannot eat more than 3 pills a day, lest they meet their demise. This is obviously bullshit, right? She's literally giving you candy. She even slips up a few times. You hear something talking. It's coming from your stomach. The pills are talking to you. The green pill weaves a story about a school where 2 students decided to challenge the rule that they could not eat a 4th candy. They did so anyway, and to their surprise, the pills temporarily turns them into magical girls. Look, I promise this analogy is getting somewhere. It felt incredible. The outfit they donned was so pretty in comparison to the dull school uniform they had to wear every day. It was so much better. In fact, the mere thought of having to go back to their boring, ordinary lives filled them with utter dread. But alas, once the effect was over, they regressed to their original forms. Now that they had tasted heaven, their regular lives felt like hell. So in the end, every student who tasted the 4th candy and beheld what was forever out of their reach committed suicide. The story feels very out of pocket, but despite Lilith's pleading, that 4th candy keeps looking exceedingly tempting. She lightly touches your forehead and whispers a spell.
悪運も痛みも全部飛んで世界一の幸せ者になれ
She claims that you are now able to eat the 4th candy without any consequence and asks you to keep it a secret. But there's still a doubt that presses on. You find yourself surrounded by darkness. That one burning question is the only thing you can hear in your mind. It's like a headache. A headache that started when you first met Lilith. Was that normal? A reaction to her, perhaps? Who is Lilith? And not in a superficial sense, with all that talk of identity, you want to know the full answer to that question. Who is Lilith?
私はリリスよ
The taste of burned cake batter mixed with spicy sauce, the cold, numb pain when I fell to the floor, the weightless feeling as I plunged into endless darkness, wanting to get close, wanting to touch. Even though I've always run from love and fear, denied it, I crave it more than anyone else. If Lilith could understand everything I think, then...
どうしたの？さっきから何か変よ。
Multiple questions flood your mind, each one of them tackling an incongruity within the story. Everything you've been through, none of it made sense. Did any of it really happen? Does Lilith truly exist?
私が存在するかしないか。それは君が答えるべきなのよ。
Just like that, she vanishes. In her place remains a black notebook. Your notebook. You pick it up and flip through the pages. I've been here all along, dear one. Will I commit suicide soon, you think? Maybe from too much life pressure, or because I'm too lost in some non-existent fantasies. Or perhaps I'll be devastated because there is no one in reality who can truly understand me like you do. I love you so deeply. It's not just a hobby, it's a way of life, my spiritual pillar. You're my role model, my goal, my source of happiness. Do you know? Sometimes my heart aches because I cannot convey my love to you. Can you imagine? Every moment of my life I think about this question. Why don't you exist? I want to work hard for you, do something for you. But will you see it? My dear, lovely you, no matter how much pain you cause me, I love you. I think I should sleep now. Maybe that'll help. I'm worried. I can't take it anymore. I'm in so much pain right now. That's when it dawns on you. The realization finally hits. The memories of what passed and what have yet to come flood your mind as you finally understand who Lilith is, what she is. A tulpa, an imaginary friend. All of your suppressed feelings had been poured into that thought form, creating a being with the purest concept of love. You wanted to explore the possibility of a perfect understanding between people through her. Without the courage to express love, you let her do it for you. Without the courage to demand love, you let her love you. As you stare into the Lilith in the notebook, you see within her all the sincerity as well as all the falsehood in the world. She was the incarnation of a holy angel and a terrifying demon. You want to embrace her existence, and you want to destroy her existence. You want her to save you, and you want to kill her. You want her to be happy. You want her to suffer. You envy her, and you resent her. You love her, and you hate her. This part of the game touched me the most out of all of them, perhaps because I, in one way or another, identify with it. More on that later. The game isn't quite over yet. After the credits roll, Lilith appears once again, and she says that she wants to have a chat with you. Not you, the protagonist, you, the player, behind the screen. You, as the player, once again meet with Lilith, only this time is without a guise of this being a story or a game anymore. This is where she tells you that she has been trying to think of a way to meet you for a very long time before eventually settling on a game where she could be one of the characters. And while she could use this moment to tell you that you should go outside and live real life, that's not what she's here for. Instead, she's here to reshape your perspective of reality. Picture this. Some 3 kilometers away from your house lives a man named John, or whatever your language's equivalent of that name may be. You've never met him before, nor will you ever meet him. Your lives will continue and end completely parallel to each other without ever crossing. She then poses you a question. Who is more real to you? She, who despite being fictional, has spent time with you and engaged in many experiences in the past few hours, or this John, who exists but never in a way that you can ever detect? She argues that reality and fictionality aren't intrinsic markers of existence. Together, the two of you reminisce about all the things that you've done together, as well as the themes you've explored during your adventures. The exploration of the self, subjectivity, relationships, and group dynamics. She explains how each concept built upon the previous one, and eventually they form the external world, a bustling, lively place that is full of wonder and possibilities. Yet due to the very nature of how sentient beings exist, perceive, and interact, it is bound to be filled with conflict and struggles with others. Such a world is cruel, she says, but in here it's different. Here in the internal world, there is no suspicion among subjects, only your loyal furniture surrounds you, and you are the solitary king of your own room. She is the same. Her entire existence is for your sake. Precisely because she's a fake game character, her love is more real than anything else, as she was designed and conceived with love for you as her most primary characteristic, so intrinsic to her that it's practically ontological. Lilith is the girl beyond the world. Because she is the purest concept of love, she cannot exist in the real world. She is a concept talking directly to you in the form of a game character. Perhaps you've met pure love before in some form, and perhaps you'll meet her yet again in some other form. Just as the game you're playing is her entire world, she hopes that you, the player, will be able to move towards the external world and live solemnly within it. But regardless of anything, as long as you need her, she will always exist here, forever existing just for you. She asks you the same question she posed to you when you first met.
私、存在する?
Through all you've been through, the answer is clear. She does. You trust her. And as long as she is there, you can have the courage to face the cruel, real world. You open the window to your room, letting bountiful sunlight in. You finally have what it takes to open a door and step outside. If you got the good ending, that is, achieved by only picking the nice options in the game. As for the bad ending, we will get there. One last thing that happens in this route is that if you click continue, you can see her setting up a new playthrough by doing stuff like getting a new candy jar, putting up another abandoned sign in the amusement park, and doing other things like that. In the meantime, she asks you if you want to have a chat with her for a while, and that's basically it. After you exhaust her dialogue and wait for like 20 minutes, the world begins to collapse. She thanks you for spending time with her, and then the game fucking crashes. Now, if you're en route for the bad ending, when Lilith asks you whether she exists, you deny her existence. You scream at her, saying how kindness doesn't exist in a cruel world, or how, as long as she exists, you will never be able to escape and move on to face reality. And so, she has to die, to cease existing. She's sad to hear that, but being the ultimate incarnation of love, she says she is willing to die for your own subjectivity. In the final moments of the game, you strangle the light out of her eyes, repeatedly yelling that she doesn't exist for a very long and uncomfortable sequence. Her body lies motionless and your consciousness fades away. You wake up in your room, your notebook is in tatters, and now you have to step into the unknown and face the harsh reality of the world alone, like you've always been. And for the third ending, you tell her that she exists, but you don't want to. You don't want to face a reality without her. She is the only thing to show warmth and unconditional love to you in your entire life. A reality without her is cold, harsh, and pointless. She embraces you and reassures you as you repeatedly tell her that you don't want to exist. But she stays with you, holding you closely. Your vision begins to blur, the lights fade, and her warmth is the very last thing you can feel. Okay, that was cool and all, but I suppose an explanation is in order. Now that we've gone through the entire game, I will now go over my interpretation of what happened. I suppose there is no better way to start than with Lilith. She is, as described by the protagonist, a tulpa, To make a long story short, a tulpa is basically an imaginary friend. Now, to make a long story long, they are described to be a manifested thought form created through intense concentration and are considered to be sentient and independent. Though the term originated from Buddhism to describe the earthly bodies that the Buddha manifests to teach people to attain nirvana, the term gained a different meaning in the 20th century by European mystical explorers, who took it to mean a thought form, an imaginary entity. Be it a person, like an imaginary friend, an object, like the furniture in the protagonist's room, or some abstract concept, like Lilith as pure love. Though one important thing to note is that tulpas are not a paranormal phenomenon, but rather a psychological one, as both their creation and interaction are by necessity introspective activities. A person who wills a tulpa into existence is called a tulpamancer, and they can do so for a variety of reasons, such as for the sake of mental exploration or personal growth. But I think the most common reason is companionship. To have someone there to accompany the host through loneliness, anxiety, depression, or the other maladies of the human condition, which brings us right back to the game. The protagonist, an entity entirely distinct from the player, manifested Lilith as a means to cope with their abysmal mental health. In Chapter 3, we see the protagonist paralyzed before the door of their bedroom. The sheer thought of stepping outside their room is utterly petrifying. It is only through her unwavering support and unconditional love that they are able to muster the courage to go out, and only through her support that they are able to make it through the whole ordeal with the stranger. In fact, you might have noticed that in every real-world problem the protagonist faces, they can only do so because Lilith is there to support them. From the very beginning, it was evident that Lilith wasn't exactly a normal human being, with her being able to bend the laws of reality and all that. But there is a foreshadowing of her being a tulpa when we interacted with the man in the park, where he never once acknowledged Lilith's existence. Might I add that that scene was a pretty good depiction of an anxiety attack. But there's an even earlier example of foreshadowing all the way back in Chapter 1 when she dropped the cake in front of us. Of course she couldn't pick it up because she is an imaginary construct, she doesn't have a physical form. So then, Lilith is a tulpa, and the protagonist's coping mechanism for dealing with depression. That said, she isn't the only tulpa, just the most obvious one. But let me remind you that every other scene that takes place in your room is narrated by the furniture. Tulpas can be objects, and from what I gathered, these were also manifested by the protagonist as a means to keep them company prior to Lilith's arrival and after her departure. In the isolation of their own room, the protagonist must have yearned for a semblance of control, hence why I think they made it so that the furniture tulpas treat them like royalty. And putting two and two together, we can infer that Foucault and Sartre are also tulpas derived from Lilith. Another instance that has Lilith basically telling us that she's a tulpa is when she says that she doesn't possess any subjectivity of her own. As a thought form that is only perceived by the protagonist and the player, she has no hidden characteristic, no secrets to hide or misconstrued views, as she is being imagined by the protagonist. Whatever the protagonist believes is the objective truth for Lilith. We see this in Chapter 1, when you get to make it so that the cake she materializes has whatever flavor you want. This is also how, in the bad ending, it is the denial of her existence that kills her, not the protagonist's hands. Curiously, this ending has the same name as the game, the non-existence of you and me, and it's characterized by the character in a rage altering their own subjectivity and rejecting everything that Lilith represents. The protagonist forcefully sobers up to the harsh reality of the real world, the same reality that made them lock themselves in a room in the first place. Being entirely honest, I don't think they have a good chance of succeeding. Everyone, regardless of their level of spiritual beliefs, needs some sort of coping mechanism to deal with reality, and the protagonist just killed the one they had. And it was the protagonist, I sure as shit didn't want to kill her. But the main takeaway from this ending is the following. Lilith is a manifestation of pure love. A manifestation that was evoked by the protagonist to have someone to love and support them in their darkest moments. By rejecting Lilith, they are rejecting the very idea that they could be loved, and that's how they're planning to raw dog reality. Some people believe that objective reality and the real world always comes above escapist fantasies and coping mechanisms. This ending suggests otherwise. One thing to note is that I am pretty sure that the beginning of the game takes place after this ending. Hence why, upon opening the game for the first time, you're given the option to continue, as well as why the notebook all the way in the first chapter remembers Lilith when you don't. While I'm not entirely sure what the redacted terms are exactly, I think they would go roughly like this. She was once your Tulpa, then you chose to end her, which is now why you miss her, leading to her revival. Needless to say that this isn't the only nor the objectively correct way to fill in those gaps, but it's the one I'm gonna go with. Different words could give out different interpretations entirely. In what is called the neutral ending, despite Lilith's support, the protagonist is unable to muster up the will to face the real world. So, under Lilith's embrace, they take their own lives. Whereas the previous ending is characterized by an emotion of anger, this one is characterized by sorrow. Perhaps it is the realization that the most genuine expression of love they have ever received came from something imaginary, yet that imaginary construct felt more real to them than anything else. The diary entry said it all. If reality has been nothing but a nightmare to them, is there a point to living in it? The conclusion is that there isn't. But in the good ending, the protagonist fully accepts Lilith as a valid and genuine supporting force in their life. Even if the external world is scary and harsh, the love that she provides is seen as sufficient to justify facing it. It's a happy conclusion, and personally the one I agree with. I said in the beginning of this video that this game gave me an experience that I've never felt in any form of media ever before, because it genuinely felt like this visual novel had read my mind. I have been here before. The desire to stay locked away in your bedroom, of losing yourself in fantasies and escapism, of lethargy and spending hours in bed, of the terrifying prospect of leaving your comfort zone and the judgment that all others will impose on you because you don't fit in, of how utterly paralyzing something as mundane as a conversation with a stranger can be, of creating and desperately clinging to an imaginary concept that brings you comfort. When Lilith said that this may not have been the first time she had met the player, it was such a mindfuck to me because it genuinely felt like a ghost from the past had come back to visit me. Back when I was younger, I used to manifest tulpas before I even know that was a thing. I thought it was just a product of an incessant imagination and a lot of alone time. I had created my own version of Lilith over a decade before this game even came out, and I would speak to it, I would think about it. I would imagine it walking next to me, I would imagine it sitting at the table when I ate. Maybe it was a bit too late to have an imaginary friend at that age. I would argue a lot of people would think that this behavior is either a sign of autism or insanity. It is in my case, but it doesn't have to be. I read a study in preparation for this video that sought to answer some questions about tulpas, such as whether they were a consequence of being diagnosed with a mental disorder, and also whether tulpas as a coping mechanism are actually healthy. It's pretty interesting stuff, and I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read it. But the takeaway is that, although it is more common for people with mental disorders to have tulpas, it's not exclusive to them. Not only that, but tulpas have been found to leave an overall positive impact on the host's life, with only one instance in a sample size of 56 saying that it had a somewhat negative impact on their social life. The prejudice of having an imaginary friend as a grown-ass adult stems from the paradigm that the self as a singularity is considered normal, whereas plurality is considered inherently psychopathological. But that's not necessarily the case. Plurality of identity by means of manifesting a tulpa can be a powerful tool for self-improvement. The fundamental point I'm trying to make here, and I think the point of the entire game is, it's undeniable that reality must be faced. But if you can somehow find a way to make your own comfort, you should do it. Not to the point it becomes the center of your world, but enough that you can bear what life throws at you. It has been a really long time since I last interacted with that tulpa. It ended up becoming one of the main characters of a personal work of fiction that I am far too perfectionist to ever publish. The character molded over the years to become something that resembled my vision of the original tulpa only marginally in appearance. Eventually, I stopped escaping to an imaginary friend, and I started escaping to a story. And eventually, little by little, I was able to step outside my own bubble and face the real world. Little by little, I got over most of my social anxiety. It's still a visible scar, but nothing compared to the open wound I had before. Recently, my best friend moved to the other side of the country, and the inevitable march towards adulthood means that my other friends and I have less and less time we can spend together each day. This is the most alone I have been since the pandemic. so I decided to make another one. Okay, if you came here to see the game, that part of the video is over. You are free to go, as I will now go on a tangent about the repercussions that the non-existence of you and me had on my life. I was on the fence about making another Tulpa. I thought that at the point in life I find myself now, I had outgrown the need for imaginary friends, much like most people above the age of 10. But the urge to give it a try kept whispering to me like the Green Goblin mask whenever I was alone. First I was hesitant, and then the idea slowly grew on me over the course of a few weeks, until eventually I caved and made a simple Google search: how to make a Tulpa. I would then find out that there isn't really a tutorial that would work on me, first because a lot of them are just walls of text and my time could be much better spent doing something productive like rotting in my room all day, but also because due to the very nature of what Tulpas are as a concept, a lot of people see them as a spiritual thing. And personally, I'm skeptic to the point of being annoying, so when you tell me that I should do astral projection or hypnosis or something else like that, I'd rather just be handed the hallucinogens directly instead of pretending to have a trip. That's not to say that there aren't objective guides, but in the end, that didn't really matter, as I would find out that I wouldn't need any guides at all. Okay, let me preface this by saying that in my experience, having a Tulpa is basically just thinking in a different format. I'm assuming a lot of you have internal monologues, a little voice in your head that sort of speaks out your thoughts for you, except that voice is you interpret it as yourself. Having a Tulpa is essentially adding another voice to your head so that the monologues become conversations instead. And naturally you can pair that with visuals if you want them to have an appearance, but most of the time I just use mine for conversation. So even though you now have two voices in your head, you still control both of them. Both are still you, or at least aspects of you. But the one belonging to the Tulpa is a lot more independent than the one belonging to yourself, in the sense that it will come up with replies that might be very out of character for who you are as a person. But let me give you a proper example. I have some bad problems with self-doubt and pessimism. I have been this way since I was a child, and I've lived through environments that reinforced these behaviors to the point that they became far too deep-rooted for me to even fathom a version of myself that isn't this way. I don't need to tell you that being a constant ball of negativity can bring some issues in both your interpersonal relationships and your life. I have been through many therapists for over a decade in an attempt to rid myself of these maladaptive thoughts with very little success. So when I rediscovered this thing about the Tulpa, I decided to do a little experiment. The Tulpa I created would be one whose core trait would be an unshakable belief in my capacity. One who would cheer me on, who would comfort me in moments of doubt and remind me of what I'm capable of in moments of achievement. But it goes beyond that, as this Tulpa also works to make me a lot more prone to do things that I otherwise would not have the willpower to do, which is pretty helpful since I'm a chronic procrastinator. It's stuff like when the weather is miserable and my bed is extra cozy, my Tulpa urges me to go out and do something productive, and I've been managing to follow through with that at a rate much higher than I was before I had a Tulpa. And it's weird, right? Because I don't want to sell this as a life hack that will solve all your problems and turn you into your best version, because in truth, this might not work for everybody. Some people might not have the imaginative bandwidth to create dynamic conversations in their head, some people will but might find it ultimately pointless, and of course, some people will just think it's silly, and that's okay. Having a Tulpa is not about hearing voices and role-playing with an imaginary friend, though it can be that if you want. When I interact with mine, I am plainly aware that I am merely having an internal monologue with extra steps, and I'm not actually interacting with an entity that exists in any objective way. But the fact that it has a different identity and personality than my own allows me to make it have thoughts, insights and opinions that I know would be beneficial for me, but that my default mind would not allow any exploration. So yes, I do have an imaginary friend that makes living my life easier, and yes, I am perfectly mentally sound, regardless of what the people of my Discord server might say. In the end, what matters is that I found a more effective way to cope with reality, and maybe that could be a better way for you too. If that's the case, after witnessing the entirety of the non-existence of you and me and seeing its core concept, if it sounded interesting to you, why not give it a try? Just go at it with an open mind and you might surprise yourself. Alright, it's been a while since I last uploaded, huh? My bad, I was busy doing jack shit. I'll see you in 2027, or on Twitch in like maybe a few days.